I'm Brad Wolf, and welcome to Dire Den. And today I'm talking about the one thing that's the most D&D thing of all. Homebrew. So what do I mean when I say homebrew is the most D&D thing of all? Well, according to the story, Dave Artisan came up with this game back in the 70s, and he showed it to Gary Gygax, and before long, they made it into a game, actually written rules, 1974. But from that point forward, the game has constantly been evolving, and over time, we've had multiple versions of Dungeons & Dragons. And now, according to legend, Gary Gygax didn't even run AD&D rules at his home game. And since that time, we've had 3rd edition and 3.5 and 4th edition and 5th edition and a bunch of retro clones and OSR games. Then you have Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2, which are essentially clones of 3rd edition, and 13th Age, which is a spin-off of 4th edition, and now we have Level Up Advanced 5e and the upcoming Tales of the Valiant, which are clones of 5th edition. And you could go to any table playing Dungeons & Dragons, and there were going to be certain rules that they used, and they were probably not playing exactly by any specific rule set. Everybody homebrews their games. That's Dungeons & Dragons. There are so many versions of this game, and that's not a bad thing. What's great about this game is you can tailor make it to the type of game you want to play with the group that you want to play with. In fact, I even use some of these homebrew rules in one campaign and then don't use them in the next campaign because I'm trying to create a particular feel for the campaign that I'm running. So I'm going to give you 5 homebrew rules that I've been using for years so you know they're play tested and you know they work. But then as a bonus, I'm going to give you one hot off the presses that we stole from Dagger Heart and just started using a couple of weeks ago, but my players absolutely love it. So the first rule is static initiative. Now you've heard of static damage, where this monster does the same amount of damage every time it hits in order to make the game faster and speed things up. Now over the years, I've tried a lot of different ways to change initiative, and none of them have quite worked as well as I wanted them to until this one. This one I absolutely love. And what you do is you set an encounter difficulty. So it's a static number that the players have to beat in order to go at the beginning of the combat round. So for example, you set a static difficulty of 14 for your encounter. Anybody who rolls their initiative 14 or higher gets to go on what I call the fast round. And then anybody who doesn't get a 14 or higher, they go on what's called the slow round. So fast round players go, the monsters go, and then the slow round players go. What's great about this is I don't have to go around the table and ask everybody what their score is. All the players do is they roll, and then they know if they're on the fast round, and I say, all right, fast round players, you're up. The other great thing about that is then the players decide who's going first. And guess what? The ones who are ready to go, like the fighter who always knows what he's doing every turn, that player is just going to go right out of the gate, and he's going to love being first in the initiative order. Then the wizard, who has to figure out what spell he's going to cast, can do that while the fighter is taking his turn, and then when it's the wizard's turn, he's ready to go because he knows he's next in the initiative order, and he's paying attention because he earned it. He earned being on the fast round, and he's going to be more engaged when it's his turn. The other thing is that being on the slow round feels like a disadvantage. So again, the players are engaged when it comes to their turn because they want to get their revenge on the monster because the monster beat them in the initiative order. This efficiency saves us enough time that we can roll initiative every turn of combat, which makes the combat even more exciting because you might be on the fast round this turn, and then you're on the slow round next turn, so you're chomping at the bit to get on the fast round the next turn, and you're really hoping you're going to beat that encounter difficulty on turn number 3. Likewise, if you go last on this turn, you're even more excited to roll and hope that you beat that encounter difficulty so that you can go first on the next turn and essentially get back-to-back attacks. That also feels great. So here's the actual rule. At the beginning of the combat round, every player makes a dexterity check against the encounter difficulty. If you succeed, you take your actions on the fast round. If you fail, you take your actions on the slow round. Players acting on the fast round decide the order in which they take actions. Players acting on the slow round decide the order in which they take actions. If you take the hide action on your turn, you can add your stealth skill to your dexterity check against the encounter difficulty. If you succeed, you take your next action on the fast round and you gain the benefits described in the unseen attackers and targets section. So as you can see, this works well with the hide action and the stealth skill. So if you take the hide action on your turn, then your stealth check is made against that encounter difficulty, and therefore if you succeed over the encounter difficulty, you are now hidden. And then when we roll initiative again, you don't have to roll. You've already established that you're hidden and you can act on the fast round that following turn. This incentivizes taking the hide action because it allows you to add your stealth proficiency to that roll instead of just your dexterity for a regular initiative roll. Now you might be asking where I get this encounter difficulty from. I basically take 10 plus the monster's dexterity bonus, and I use that if it's a group of like monsters. So if it's a group of all bugbears, then I'll just take their dexterity bonus of +2 and add that to 10, encounter difficulty is now 12. However, if that group of bugbears is being led by a druid or a wizard, I might use the leader's wisdom modifier or intelligence modifier and add that to 10. So that wizard who has a 16 intelligence, that would make it a +3, and now the encounter difficulty is 10 plus 3, that's 13. Then I might also give them a home turf bonus if the monsters are in their lair. So that's where you can get an encounter difficulty of like a 14 or 15, and that makes it pretty challenging. So I typically set that encounter difficulty between 12 and 15, and historically that has resulted in a very consistent half the players going on the fast round and half the players going on the slow round in almost every combat. Now check this out. Sky Zephyrs is a Kickstarter that's live right now, about 17 days left. Sky Zephyrs is a 250 plus page tome that reimagines how vehicles and airships operate in D&D 5e. Unlock a whole new way to experience swashbuckling, dynamic, three-dimensional vehicle movement and combat as you take your adventures to new uncharted heights. Soar across the skies with your custom-built Zephyr and hand-selected aircrew. Use Sky Zephyr's vast collection of items, spells, and player options to turn the tide as you face a menagerie of creatures and NPC Zephyrs. Sky Zephyr's also includes the first ever TTRPG vehicle builder web application. Use the affiliate link in the description of this video, and when you support the Kickstarter, you'll also support the Dire Den YouTube channel. You get a 12-chapter book all about airships that you can also convert to starships or underwater adventures for your 5e campaigns. And in the meantime, you help me out too. Explore the Sky Zephyrs Kickstarter today. The next homebrew rule I use is slot-based encumbrance. And if you've ever played a computer RPG, then you know what I'm talking about. Also, a lot of OSR, old school Renaissance RPGs, also use a slot-based encumbrance, and I find it far more effective than trying to calculate weight or just ignoring encumbrance altogether. What I hate about calculating weight is obvious. It's a pain in the butt. However, ignoring encumbrance altogether starts to get ridiculous by the time characters are high enough level, because they're carrying around a whole shop's worth of crap. So slot-based encumbrance is the way to go, in my opinion, and we base it on both strength and dexterity, as you'll see in the rule here. Your strength score equals the number of items you can carry. Anything the size of a torch counts as 1 item. Anything smaller than a torch counts as half an item. Your dexterity modifier, minimum of 1, equals the number of items you have ready. You can draw a readied item as an interaction. Now what you might be figuring out is that even though my players really like 5th edition because of all the player options they have access to, I prefer running an old school style of game. And these homebrew rules help me create that old school feel but still allow my players to enjoy their 5e mechanics. What I like about slot-based encumbrance is it makes equipment important. This also helps prevent players from always dumping their strength stat, because somebody needs to carry the gear. The other thing I really like about the dex modifier of ready items is it means only so many items can be quickly drawn. So you might be thinking, if I have a dexterity of 16, that's a +3, so that means that's 3 items I could have at the ready. And I don't usually use more than 3 weapons. But what about healing potions? You have to have healing potions and your weapons at the ready. Now that +3 doesn't seem as big as it used to. So the next homebrew rule is what I call safe rests. This adds a third type of rest to the game. So you have your short rest and you have your long rest, and then we add the safe rest. The short rest still accomplishes all the same things, but I make it even shorter. I cut a short rest down to 20 minutes. The reason I do that is I like time pressure to drive the narrative. So things have to be accomplished before the next full moon, or things have to be accomplished before midnight tonight. Putting a timer on things creates dramatic tension, and if the players are always stopping for an hour to take a short rest, and then taking an 8-hour long rest, that impedes that time crunch. Back in the day, I used to play basketball, and we would go full tilt for the whole first half and recharge our batteries during halftime, and then go full tilt for the whole second half of the game. So I don't see why a short rest needs to be a whole hour long. Likewise, if you've ever been on a big time crunch for work, a 4 hours night's sleep isn't great, but it's enough to get you back to work and get going the next day. And sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. So a 4-hour long rest makes sense to me too. But here's the kicker. The short rest and the long rest do not give you back your hit points. Here's the rule. A short rest is a period of downtime, at least 20 minutes, during which a character does nothing more strenuous than eating, drinking, reading, and tending to wounds. If a character drinks water during this rest, they can spend 1 or more hit dice at the end of the short rest. A long rest is a period of downtime, at least 4 hours, during which a character does nothing more strenuous than eating, drinking, reading, and tending to wounds. If a character eats food and drinks water during this rest, they can spend 1 or more hit dice at the end of the long rest. A safe rest is a period of downtime, at least 12 hours in a safe and comfortable location, during which a character does nothing more strenuous than eating, drinking, reading, and tending to wounds. If the character eats, drinks water, and sleeps for 8 hours during this rest, they regain all lost hit points. The character also regains spent hit dice up to the number of dice equal to half of the character's total number of them. Minimum of 1 die. Now I know that other YouTubers, House DM and Dungeon Coach, use a similar system, and they've reported success with it too. But I really like using this, and I find it really helpful to put the emphasis on hit dice and make hit dice a more important resource. The other thing this does is it makes your encumbrance rules that we talked about earlier even more important, because if you notice, all of these rests depend on water and food, which of course makes logical sense. Then the other thing this does is, because the safe rest has to be both safe and comfortable, then that encourages players to interact with NPCs in between their adventuring days. So this encourages more interactions in towns and taverns, as well as causing the players to look for safe places to stay, which means interacting with even more NPCs than usual. Now remember how I said I like that old school feel? Roll 3d6 for ability scores. The bottom line is that 5th edition is a little too easy on players. Let's face it. I mean, I've run this game for almost 10 years now, and I can tell you that as an experienced DM, I can make it challenging, and it's not a cakewalk for my players. Never has been. However, I recognize that for new DMs, it's really hard to make this game challenging. But one of the things that's important to remember is that rolling 4d6 for your stats is an optional rule, feats are an optional rule, and multi-classing is an optional rule. If you allow all 3 of those, 5e is absolutely too easy for players. and I don't like to take away feats, and I don't like to take away multiclassing. Another advantage to having lower stats at the beginning is the Dungeon Master can be more generous with magic items, which just makes the game more interesting and exciting. Because that's the other thing about 5e's Bounded Accuracy, is it doesn't include the bonuses for magic items. Now overall, I think Bounded Accuracy is great and it definitely improves the game in a lot of ways. But if you add all those optional rules, 46 drop the lowest for stats, feats, multiclassing, and give out a generous amount of magic items, this game does become a cakewalk. So there needs to be some fine tuning, and you as a DM are perfectly within your purview to set some limits. Because again, this game has to be fun for you. You're a player too, let's face it. But I'm not completely brutal, so let's take a look at how I do 3d6 ability scores. So in this example, a player rolls a 12, a 13, a 6, 11, 15, and a 9. Now the 6 is below an 8, so we automatically raise it to 8. So they end up with a 12, a 13, an 8, an 11, 15, and 9. There's a reason I do this. In my experience, when players have a stat below an 8, they tend to roleplay their character like they have a disability. And that's not something I want to encourage, unless the player has a specific reason for that we discuss ahead of time. In the next example, the player rolls an 8, a 13, an 11, 12, 10, and 9. Now, none of these scores are a 14 or higher, so therefore they get to take their lowest one, the 8, and raise it to 14. This prevents anyone from suffering from extremely terrible rolls. This is the one you've been waiting for. This is the one we stole from Dagger Heart, and my players absolutely love it, and I love it too. It's great. Now, we did tweak it a little bit to fit with 5th edition, but that actually made it come out a little harsher, which I enjoy. When you reach 0 hit points, choose one of the following options. Hand of Fate. On your next turn, make 1 death saving throw. If you succeed, you stabilize. If you fail, you die. Permanent Injury. On your next turn, permanently subtract 2 from any of your ability scores and you automatically stabilize. Blaze of Glory. On your next turn, you can make 1 attack or cast 1 spell. You automatically succeed with a critical hit, then you die. So I've only used this about 3, maybe 4 sessions, but so far it's been exhilarating. The fact that players get to choose what happens when they drop to 0 hit points makes it that much more fun. Because if you notice in our rules, the player doesn't get the results until their next turn. So that means a whole turn goes by while they're trying to decide what to do. That builds suspense for them. And it builds excitement for the other players. Now, this also dovetails really nicely with our initiative system, because what happens when you're incapacitated, you automatically fail dexterity checks, which means you automatically are going to go on the slow round in our initiative. So once you drop to 0 hit points, the other players have plenty of time. They have the rest of the turn after they find out that you have dropped to 0, and they have all of next turn to be able to stop you from dying. That actually creates plenty of time for them to do it, but it feels like a significant time pressure on the other players. And the Blaze of Glory is just completely a blast. Now realize, the rule says that you automatically critical hit, and it also says that you can use a spell. However, only certain spells can critical hit. Only the ones that you have to roll an attack for, which are mostly spells that players don't take because oftentimes players prefer the guaranteed damage of a saving throw based spell. So this actually encourages players to take spells like Chromatic Orb or Scorching Ray or Melf's Acid Arrow because they want that roll to hit if they end up going out in a Blaze of Glory. Is there a better way to go out in a Blaze of Glory other than Scorching Ray? I don't know. You tell me in the comments. And tell me in the comments what you think about the rest of these homebrew rules and if you would use them or not and what you love about them or what you hate about them. Let's have a discussion. I totally enjoy engaging with you guys in the comments. It's been great so far. And once again, thanks for watching and thanks for visiting the Dire Den.